us about Feeling Through.
Feeling Through.
Feeling Through.
Packs more punch than most Hollywood blockbusters.
If you're not touched by that, there's something seriously wrong with you.
It's a sweet, sweet story of humanity.
This film is terrific.
So touching and heartbreaking.
Beautifully shot.
Incredible, powerful. It is a tearjerker. It's inspiring.
It challenges us to see the world in a different way.
Okay, so good morning, guys, and welcome to Unique and Different with me, Shamla. And today, as you just saw, this short film was written by a lot of international stars. Those stars you just saw, along with Priyanka Chopra, Trevor Noah, Whoopi Goldberg, and a whole host of them. And today I have the creator and director and filmmaker of Feeling Through. So welcome, Doug. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
I know I have you straight from LA. How is LA in terms of COVID? Good?
You know, things have definitely been trending in the right direction where things are starting to open up again. It's starting to feel a little bit more like normal. But, you know, I think I'm going to be a little kind of cautiously optimistic as we move forward just because, you know, all of this is still very new. But fortunately, right now, things are going in the right direction. That's
awesome. So let's talk Feeling Through. What was the idea behind? Okay, so when I saw you on Kelly Clarkson along with Marilyn Matlin, right? Mm-hmm. And I was impressed. It's because you actually had a legitimate blind and deaf person, you know, be the star and be the actor of Feeling Through. What inspired this film?
Well, it was actually inspired by an encounter I had 10 years ago. That was, you know, in certain ways similar to what you see in the film. I was coming home late one night in New York City, and I saw a man on a street corner holding a sign that noted that he was deaf, blind, and in need of assistance. And it turned, you know, he ended up writing to me in a notepad that he needed a bus. And when I realized the bus wasn't coming for a long time, and I wanted to sit and wait with him, I wanted to also figure out how to communicate with him. And I just instinctively started tracing one letter at a time on his palm, writing words to him that he understood. And I would later find out that's called print on palm, but at the time I did not know that communication existed. And we ended up having a whole conversation that way. And yes, it was notable that this man, Artemio, was the first deaf-blind person I'd ever met, because in that moment I realized like that there was this whole community that I'd never even really thought about, largely because I'd never seen them on my TV screen or, you know, in movies or in the media in any way. Other than hearing about Helen Keller growing up briefly in school, I'd never heard about anyone from the community. So that really stood out to me. But moreover, this man, Artemio, was just such a warm, charismatic, and friendly guy that I felt like I'd really made a connection with that evening, that interaction and the intimacy with how we communicated really stuck with me long after. So that was really what inspired me to write the film.
In terms of getting somebody with an actual disability to portray the role and the star of the film, right? How difficult was it? And I'm thinking you just hinted your answer, but what inspired you to actually go and seek out this individual through casting?
Well, from the moment I wrote this film actually about 9 years ago now, but I didn't start making it until about 6 years after that. Because at the time that I wrote it, I just didn't feel like I was ready to do it justice in the way that I wanted to. So I put it aside and did some other things in the interim. And when I came back to it on a fateful day where I was just like, you know, opening folders I hadn't opened in a while and reading things, when I read the script, you know, about 3 years ago on that day, I instantly in my gut knew that it was the time to make it. And also instinctively in that moment, even though I hadn't thought about it yet, my first instinct was I have to cast a deafblind actor in this film. I hadn't really even thought it through. It was really instinct for me that was just the way that I needed to do it. So when I started reaching out to the community and trying to connect with various people in the community, I was very quickly directed to Helen Keller National Center. with whom I ended up partnering with to make this film and to cast, most specifically to cast Robert Tarango, who's our actor, who's deafblind. And you know, it was one of those things where, you know, I often get asked like, oh, like how much harder was it to work with Robert and things like that. And the way I say it is like, you know, making films is hard. You know, every element of making a film is hard. So to kind of microscope on just that one aspect being hard would be not really a fair representation, because it was hard just like every element was hard. But what I can say is it actually ended up being easier for me to cast Robert in the role of Artie than it was to cast the other main character, Tariq, which most people, Stephen Prescott played beautifully. Yeah. But most people would like make this assumption that, you know, oh yeah, finding a young Black, you know, sighted and hearing actor, that shouldn't be hard. But finding like a deaf-blind actor, that's going to be impossible. It was actually the other way around for me. It was much harder for me to find the right Tariq than it was Artie. And part of that was, you know, having the privilege to work with Helen Keller National Center and have them reach out to their personal network to start to round up people that were a good fit.
So in filming this, right? This was filmed in 2019. I did not mention that it is Academy Award nominated for Best Action Film. Were you thinking that you would be actually represent or going to the Oscars and going to the Academy Awards when filming this, when thinking of this idea? Did you think of that? And how it felt when you actually received word that you were nominated for this esteemed award?
You know, definitely had high hopes starting off with this project. It was something that like was deeply meaningful to me, that I was very, very, very passionate about making, and was fortunate to start aligning with some really great people to make it. Yeah, you know, so in certain ways, you know, that's not necessarily something in one's mind when you're starting something off. In other ways, like, you know, certainly we were hopeful to have a really big impact with it and be able to share it with a lot of people. Maybe there were certain thoughts that crossed early on about the Oscars, but to be quite honest, I almost didn't even submit. I submitted right before the deadline because of the encouragement of one of our executive producers. I initially didn't think that it was even worth our time because I knew very little about the process and didn't know if we really had a good chance or not. So when it actually came to that moment, like I almost didn't even submit to the Oscars, which I'm obviously very thankful now that I did. Yeah.
So you, as an individual, right? As an individual, you are a filmmaker, a director, creative director, and so on. I read that you target community that is underrepresented. What, in your words, why target that audience? You know, why target that audience in general, underrepresented communities globally?
So for me, you know, what it kind of even, the way I'd even clarify that even further is that I just realized just as a storyteller, I gravitated towards stories that even beyond, it ended up often encompassing maybe a group that's underrepresented in the way that we've commonly come to, like the definition we've come to equate with that term. But for me, it was even just more about it focusing in on a character that normally would maybe be a background character in someone else's story or not be the main character in someone else's story. It's more about that. And then that ends up often being someone that's underrepresented, but it more than anything comes from that place of just being interested in the character that normally wouldn't be the focus of the story.
And so we have 2 minutes, right? So I just want you to wrap up in terms of how, in terms of underrepresented is persons with disability, and what advice would you give to in the entertainment industry to have persons with disability be represented in films, in movies, etc., and persons who, you know, in community that disenfranchised and vulnerable?
Well, I'm really fortunate to have had the experience with feeling through and be able to, work with Helen Keller National Center, be able to cast Robert, our deafblind actor, and in turn be able to learn so much about, disability representation in storytelling and moreover the lack thereof.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would say, that I would urge other people who are maybe haven't had the opportunity to work with people with disabilities or have not had stories that include the community is to think about a couple things real quickly. One would be to understand that as storytellers, we have a responsibility to accurately reflect the world around us, regardless of the genre we work in. Like, I think that, it applies to all genres. And the reality is anywhere from a fifth to a quarter of the world's population is the disability community. So understanding that the community needs to be reflected in our stories. And then moreover, kind of to what we were talking about earlier in this conversation, to get out of the mindset of like how much harder or all of the additional considerations, because that's the wrong lens to be looking through. Because the reality is, having, in our experience, having someone like Robert be a part of the film, there was so much that his presence and his talent added to the film. That was the real takeaway.
Authenticity. It adds authenticity.
The authenticity, and also just the fact that, quite frankly, like having Robert participate in being the first deafblind actor to star in a film, it created more of a significance for every person on that set working on that film, knowing that they were a part of something that was important, that was important to be a part of and important to help display for other people to hopefully emulate moving forward. So it really was just an amazing thing to be a part of.
I know we are out of time. I want to say thank you so much. Thank you. And I know you even have an executive producer. Just want to mention this, who is Marlon Martin. All right, I got that right?
Marlon Martin.
Yeah, and she is also deaf. And I want to say thank you so much, Doug, for coming, sharing the knowledge, guys. You can look it up online on their website. Feeling True. It's an inspirational film. It's motivational, and you will be raved by it just like anyone else. And with that being said, guys, I know this week is also Accessibility Awareness Day on the 20th. So tune in next week where I have the Minister of Works and Transport, where we have an in-depth discussion in terms of accessibility now and where we are going. Doug, thank you so much. And guys, I always say, until next week, be good, do good. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care.